Have you ever wondered how the country that lay at the crossroads of the world's oldest civilizations, the land that gave humanity the first alphabet, the first farming villages, the first irrigated wheat fields, and the first walled cities ever built, became today the territory where more than half of the population has either fled, been displaced, or buried someone in the past 14 years? The official maps still show the same borders. The flags still flutter on rooftops. The names of the cities still appear in the textbooks of children sitting in tents along the Turkish border. But the country those maps describe and the country that exists on the ground have not been the same nation since 2011. Syria today is two photographs laid one on top of the other, and only one of them is admitted in public. If you enjoy documentaries like this one, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Let's keep going. The popular version, the one repeated for almost a decade and a half in the news cycles of distant capitals, describes a civil war reduced to a one-line headline: a regime, a rebellion, a stalemate, a humanitarian footnote. But anyone who has walked the alleys of old Damascus at dawn, smelled the bread coming out of a basement oven in Aleppo, listened to a grandmother in Latakia count the names of relatives scattered across 4 continents, or watched a bricklayer in Homs lay one stone at a time over the cracked foundation of his old apartment building, knows that the war is only one of the layers. Underneath and on top and around it, a different country has been growing. A country of returns nobody filmed, a country of basements turned into schools, a country of widows running grocery stalls, a country of boys who learned to weld at 12 because there was no one else left to do it, a country that the satellite images cannot register because what is being rebuilt is not in concrete and steel, but in habit, in memory, in the muscle of waking up tomorrow. The numbers, when written out in full, sound almost impossible. More than 600,000 dead since the conflict began. Around 13 million people uprooted, which is to say more than half of the population that lived inside Syria before 2011. Roughly 5,700,000 registered as refugees outside the borders, mostly in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. Another 7 million internally displaced, moving from one ruined town to another without ever crossing a frontier. 9 out of every 10 Syrians living below the poverty line. A national currency that lost around 99% of its value against the dollar in less than 13 years. Bread prices multiplied by more than 30 in the public bakeries that still operate. Electricity that arrives in many neighborhoods of Damascus for 2 hours, sometimes 3, sometimes none at all on any given day. And yet, and this is the word that sustains the entire story, and yet, in the spring of 2025, after the sudden fall of the regime that had ruled the country for more than half a century, hundreds of thousands of Syrians began doing something the international press almost did not register. They began going back, not all of them, not even most of them, but enough to fill border crossings in Bab al-Hawa, enough to overwhelm minibuses leaving Beirut at 3 in the morning. Enough to make the price of a used pickup truck in Aleppo double in less than 4 months. The returns are unstable, partial, often temporary. People come, look at the ruins of their house, sleep 2 nights in a room without windows, decide it is impossible, leave again. Others come and stay. And in the gap between leaving and staying, a hidden life is being negotiated. To understand this country, it is necessary to step away from the news framework and walk into the alleys. Not the alleys of Damascus that appear in foreign correspondent reports, but the side streets of neighborhoods like Jobar, like Yarmouk, like the eastern districts of Aleppo, that for years were nothing but a gray expanse of pulverized concrete on satellite photographs. In those places, the rule of life is invisible to anyone who has not lived through war. Water comes from rooftop tanks filled by hand. Cooking gas is sold in informal trucks that pass twice a week if the road is clear. Most homes have a small solar panel attached to the balcony, bought second-hand for the equivalent of a month and a half of a public sector salary, and it powers exactly one light bulb, a phone charger, and a small fan in summer. Anything beyond that is luxury. Khaled is 58 years old and has lived in the same apartment building in the Medan district of Damascus since she was 16. She is one of those characters who, in the documentary version that never got made, would have been on the screen for less than 4 minutes and would have explained more than 400 news reports. She lost her husband to a heart attack in 2014, brought on, she believes, by the months of nighttime shelling that shook the windows of her building. She lost a son to migration, gone first to Turkey, then to Germany, where he now repairs refrigerators in a city she cannot pronounce without smiling at her own difficulty. She kept a daughter at home, a young woman who teaches Arabic to children of foreign aid workers and earns, in a good month, the equivalent of about $60. Khaled wakes up at 4:30 in the morning. She fills 2 plastic containers with water from the building tank in case the pump does not work later. She lights a small kerosene burner. She makes coffee. She sits by the window and counts how many cars pass in the first half hour after sunrise. She says that before the war, it was at least 1 every 20 seconds. Today it is sometimes 1 every 5 minutes. Then she goes to the bakery, joins a line that is shorter than it was 3 years ago, but longer than it was 3 decades ago, and pays with bills so worn out that they tear at the corners when handed over. This is the texture of daily life that no satellite captures. There is a popular reading of post-conflict Syria that imagines the country as a frozen ruin, a kind of indoor museum of what war can do. The reality on the ground tells another story. Walk through the Hamidiyya Souk in the old city of Damascus, and you will see hundreds of small shops open, owners sitting behind counters of sweets, of silk scarves, of soaps made from olive oil and laurel that have been produced in Aleppo for more than 1,000 years. The traffic is intense. The lights of the souk are kept on by a private generator that costs the cooperative of shopkeepers something close to $400 a month in fuel. The fuel is bought from a network that nobody asks too many questions about. The transactions happen in cash, in 3 currencies at once: Syrian pounds, US dollars, and Turkish lira. The exchange rate is fixed informally by a handful of older men who sit in a particular cafe and whose phones never stop ringing. Officially, the central bank publishes a different rate. The shopkeepers laugh when asked about that rate. They use the one the older men set. In Aleppo, the second city, the contrast between destruction and life is so abrupt that it disorients first-time visitors. Entire neighborhoods of the eastern half remain a labyrinth of half-standing walls, of staircases that lead nowhere, of children's school notebooks half buried in dust. Yet, 3 streets over, a barber has reopened his shop in a building that lost its upper 2 floors. He works under a tarp. He charges the equivalent of $1 for a full haircut and shave. He has 3 sons, the oldest of whom learned barbering not from him, but from a refugee uncle who returned from Lebanon last year. The barber's name is Abu Yusuf. He is 47 and limps slightly from a piece of shrapnel that lodged in his right knee in 2016 and was never fully removed because the surgeons told him removing it would do more damage than leaving it. He works 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. He says that the most striking thing about post-war Aleppo is not the rubble, which everyone expects, but the silence at night. Before the war, he says, the city did not sleep. Today, after 10 in the evening, you can hear a single motorbike going by from a kilometer away. The official version of the Syrian economy says it is recovering. The reality on the ground says it is improvising. There is a difference, and the difference is measured in calories. The World Food Programme classifies more than half of the population, around 12,400,000 people, as food insecure. That means, in concrete terms, that 1 out of every 2 Syrians does not know with certainty what they will eat tomorrow. The basic monthly food basket, the one that includes wheat, lentils, oil, sugar, and a few vegetables, costs, in early 2026, the equivalent of more than 4 times the monthly minimum public salary. A public school teacher, a hospital nurse, a low-level civil servant earns in a month less than what a single sack of rice costs in the open market. The math, if done strictly, does not close, and yet people eat. They eat because remittances arrive from cousins in Berlin, from siblings in Toronto, from in-laws in Riyadh. They eat because somebody trades labor for tomatoes. They eat because one neighbor still keeps a chicken on the rooftop and shares the eggs. For someone working a job in the new informal economy, the routine begins before dawn. Take the case of Rana, 26, originally from a village outside Idlib, now living in a single rented room in a working-class neighborhood of Damascus. Rana studied chemistry for 2 years at a public university, until the fuel cost of getting to the campus made it impossible to continue. She left the program in 2023. Now she works for a small cosmetics workshop that produces soap, hair oil, and rosewater for buyers in Lebanon and Jordan. The workshop has 6 employees, all women, all between 20 and 40. They earn the equivalent of about $70 a month, paid in cash, half in dollars and half in Syrian pounds. Rana sends $30 of that to her mother, who still lives in a half-destroyed house near her birthplace. She keeps the rest for rent, food, and the bus that takes her across the city in the morning. The bus ride costs less than the price of a coffee in any European capital, but it eats up nearly 1/10 of her daily earnings. She says, when asked what she would change, if she could change one thing, that she would like to be able to study again. She does not say she would like to leave Syria. That is a sentence she avoids. The reasons are several. Her mother is alone. Her younger brother is in compulsory military service, the duration of which has expanded and contracted depending on the political moment. And more quietly, because Rana has watched dozens of people from her village try the migration route and has seen how many of them never made it across the Aegean, or made it and then sank into invisibility in some European peripheral town. The story of the Syrian who left, often told as a story of escape, is also frequently a story of disappearance into a different kind of difficulty. There is another version of this story that does not reach international audiences. It is the story of those who never left. Around 15 million Syrians, give or take, remained inside the borders during the whole period of the conflict. They are the silent majority of this war. They were never refugees. They were never officially displaced. They simply stayed in their towns, in their neighborhoods, in their family homes, while the world around them collapsed and was partly rebuilt. The reasons for staying are not heroic. They are practical. An elderly parent who could not travel, a small business that could not be moved, a piece of land that in legal limbo would be lost forever the moment its owner crossed the border, a husband in detention whose family wanted to stay close in case any news came, a wife whose papers were lost in a bombing in 2013, a grandfather who refused, a mother who could not bear the thought of starting over at the age of 62 in a refugee camp where she would not understand the language of the aid workers. Those who stayed developed a specific kind of resilience that the international literature rarely names. They learned to live without expectations of normality. They learned to convert every household object into a tool of survival. The plastic bottle becomes a water reserve. The metal cookie tin becomes a stove. The wooden door becomes firewood, then becomes a shelf, then becomes a sign for a small grocery store. They learned the exact value of a kilo of sugar in 3 currencies. They learned to read the sound of incoming versus outgoing artillery. They learned to sleep 4 hours in the worst nights and 12 hours in the calmer ones. They learned not to plan more than 2 weeks ahead. And when the regime fell in late 2024, after a rebel offensive that surprised even the rebels themselves with its speed, those who stayed found themselves in a position both familiar and entirely new. Familiar because the basic logic of scarcity remained. New because, for the first time in over half a century, the political ceiling was open. What that opening means in practice is still being negotiated, neighborhood by neighborhood, family by family, town by town. The data on returns is messy. United Nations agencies estimate that between December of 2024 and the end of 2025, around 600,000 Syrian refugees returned from neighboring countries, and around 1,200,000 internally displaced people returned to their original areas. Other estimates put the numbers higher. Independent organizations on the ground say that for every family that returns and stays, there are at least 2 that return, evaluate and leave again. The cost of return is enormous. To restore a damaged but standing house, a family needs on average something close to $7,000. To restore a completely destroyed house, the figure rises to more than $30,000. Most Syrian families have not seen those sums of money in their lives, yet the returns happen. Khaled, 41, returned to a neighborhood of eastern Aleppo in February of 2025 after almost 8 years in a small town in southern Turkey. He had worked there as a welder. He learned to speak basic Turkish. His 2 children went to Turkish public schools and lost most of their Arabic. When he crossed back through the border at Bab al-Hawa, he carried 2 suitcases, a folder of documents, and a printed photograph of his old building taken from a Facebook page run by former neighbors. The building was no longer there, or rather half of it was there, the half facing east, and the staircase, and a fragment of the kitchen wall of what used to be his apartment on the 3rd floor. He spent 3 days walking around the rubble. He spoke to neighbors who had stayed. He drank tea with an old friend who now sells used clothing from a stand at the corner. On the 4th day, he made a decision. He would not rebuild on his old plot. He would buy, for a price that would have been laughable before the war, a smaller piece of land on the edge of the same district and start there. He calls his wife in Turkey every night. She is undecided. The children are angry. He says he understands them. He says he is staying anyway. To understand why he is staying, it is necessary to widen the lens. Syria is not only a war zone in slow recovery. It is also one of the oldest continuously inhabited human landscapes on the planet. Damascus has been a city for at least 11,000 years, depending on which archaeologist is consulted. Aleppo has been a major commercial hub since the era of the Bronze Age trade routes. The site of Mari on the Euphrates produced cuneiform tablets that document business deals from almost 4,000 years ago. The columns of Palmyra, the cathedral mosaics of Malula, the Crusader fortress of Crac des Chevaliers, the ruins of Apamea, the Roman theatre of Bosra, the church complexes of the so-called dead cities in the north, all of these were intact, or nearly intact, before the conflict began. Some were heavily damaged, some were looted, some were systematically destroyed by extremist groups that controlled them temporarily. Others survived in ways that even the archaeologists who study them describe as inexplicable. For someone working as a guard at one of these sites, the job has become a kind of solitary vigil. Take Suhail, 53, a guard at one of the smaller archaeological complexes in northern Syria, near the ancient town of Saint Simeon. He has worked there since he was 26. His father worked there before him. He earns the equivalent of less than $50 a month from a state institution that is itself only half functional. He often goes weeks without seeing his supervisor. He sweeps the stones. He chases away occasional thieves who try to dig at night for small artifacts to sell on the black market. He keeps a notebook in which he records the names of the foreign archaeologists who visited the site over the past 3 decades, in case any of them returns. He has had no real visitors since 2011, except once, a small French team that came briefly in 2023 under a permit that nobody fully understood. He says he is not lonely. The stones, he says, are company enough. The stones, he adds, have been here for 16 centuries. He is only passing through. This patience, this sense of geological time applied to daily life, is one of the threads that explains the country. There is another thread, harder to admit, that runs through every conversation in post-war Syria. It is the thread of the missing. More than 100,000 people, according to organizations that track these cases, disappeared during the war years. Some died in detention, some died under torture, some died in massacres in towns whose names became briefly news and then disappeared from the headlines. Some are alive, somewhere, in conditions that families cannot verify. The fall of the previous regime opened the prisons, and what came out of those prisons in late 2024 was not only the surviving prisoners, it was also the documentation, files, photographs, registries. For weeks, families lined up in front of buildings in Damascus, in Homs, in Hama, in Dara, looking at lists, looking at faces. Some found names, many did not. For Suad, 64, a retired schoolteacher in Homs, that opening of the files was both relief and devastation. She had been looking for her oldest son since 2012. He had been a medical student. He had been detained at a checkpoint. Nothing more was officially known for 12 years. In January of 2025, she found, in a folder of photographs of detainees who had died in custody, a face she recognized. She has not stopped thinking about that face since. She has not stopped going to the gravesite that human rights organizations identified on the outskirts of the city, in the area where many of those bodies were buried in unmarked rows. She brings flowers. She brings small candies of the type her son liked when he was a child. She does not cry in public. She says that after 12 years, the body knows when to stop crying. This is the dimension of the country that the daily news, with its focus on economic indicators and ceasefire agreements, almost never captures. For someone in their early 20s, growing up in this Syria means growing up with a personal history that contains entire chapters about people they have never met. A father in Germany since 2015, a grandfather buried in a cemetery in Idlib where the family no longer lives, an aunt in Brazil who sends voice messages in broken Arabic mixed with Portuguese, a cousin who left for Canada and whose children now do not understand what the family is saying when they call. For someone in their early 20s, the family album is not a book of photographs, but a directory of WhatsApp contacts spread across at least 4 continents. Lana is 23. She lives with her mother in a small apartment in the Medze district of Damascus. Her father went to Sweden in 2015, planning to bring the family within a year. The legal process took longer than expected. Then her mother fell ill. Then the war intensified again. Then the war calmed down again. Then the regime fell. Lana has not seen her father in person in almost 11 years. She speaks to him on video every Friday. She studies pharmacy at a public university where most of the textbooks are photocopies of older editions, where the lab equipment dates from before 1990, and where, in the cold months, students wear coats inside the classrooms because the heating system has not worked for years. She is one of the best students in her year. She is also, like most of her generation, deeply ambivalent about the future. She does not want to leave. She does not want to stay. She wants what 23-year-olds anywhere want, which is the possibility of choosing. The difference is that, in her case, the possibility of choosing is itself the rare commodity. The economy of post-war Syria is sustained in large part by what the formal statistics cannot easily measure. Remittances from the Syrian diaspora are estimated to bring into the country something between $2 billion and $4 billion a year, depending on whose methodology one trusts. That is, in many recent years, more than the entire formal export sector. Money arrives through informal hawala networks, through cash brought by relatives who visit, through cryptocurrencies handled by a small but growing number of younger Syrians, and through the simple fact that when a relative in Saudi Arabia or Germany sends $100 home, that $100 sustains a family for 2 to 3 weeks. There is also an underground economy of skills that the country quietly redistributes. Tens of thousands of doctors who left during the war are now consulting via video with patients still inside Syria. Lawyers who fled to Beirut or Istanbul advise relatives navigating property disputes back in Damascus. Engineers in Berlin help through long-distance phone calls with the reconstruction of family homes in Homs. None of this appears in the gross domestic product. All of it sustains the daily reality. For those who try to rebuild, the obstacles begin with the simplest things. Cement is expensive. Steel is more expensive. Skilled labor is scarce because many of the best masons, electricians, and plumbers left the country years ago. Insurance does not exist for most properties. Banks do not lend for reconstruction. Anyone who rebuilds with cash, with family loans, with materials bought on credit from a neighbor who runs the local hardware store. The pace is slow. A house that, in normal conditions, would be rebuilt in 6 months takes 2 to 3 years. Imad, 35, is a civil engineer who returned to Homs from Lebanon in mid-2025. He had been working there as a foreman on construction projects. In his old neighborhood, almost 40% of the buildings are uninhabitable. He set up, with 2 cousins, a small consulting office. They charge families a modest fee to evaluate whether a damaged building can be safely repaired or whether it needs to be demolished. The fee, equivalent to about $30, covers their daily transportation and the cost of basic tools. They make almost no profit. They do it, Imad says, because if they do not do it, somebody else without their training will, and people will move back into buildings that should not be inhabited. He has already advised 4 families against returning to their homes. He has helped 7 others draw up restoration plans that they may or may not be able to complete in the next 5 years. On the larger scale, the official reconstruction figures are staggering. The United Nations estimates that the total cost of rebuilding Syria's housing, infrastructure, hospitals, schools, water systems, and electrical grid would be somewhere between $250 and $400 billion. That is more than 10 times the entire annual budget of any Syrian government that has existed in this century. No combination of donors, international loans, or private investment has yet appeared capable of covering that gap. The rebuilding, therefore, happens in the only way it can, from below, brick by brick, family by family, with the resources each household manages to gather. And what about the children? Half of the Syrian school-age population, according to UNICEF, lost at least 1 year of formal schooling during the war. More than 2,400,000 children remain out of school inside Syria. Another 700,000 are out of school among the refugee populations in neighboring countries. The classrooms that do function are often crowded, undersupplied, and staffed by teachers who themselves have not received regular training in over a decade. A teacher in a public school in Damascus earns less per month than the price of a single decent pair of shoes for a child. Many teachers supplement their income by giving private lessons in the afternoons, charging modest fees that nonetheless add up to more than their official salary. In the makeshift schools of the camps near Idlib, classes happen in tents, in shipping containers, in basements of half-destroyed buildings. The teachers are often young women who themselves had to interrupt their own studies. The pedagogy is improvised. The blackboards are sheets of plywood painted black. The chalk is rationed. The textbooks are old, printed before the war, sometimes with photographs of political figures who are no longer in power. Photographs that the teachers cover with pieces of paper because it is simpler than ignoring them. For someone working as a teacher in those conditions, the question is not how to deliver the official curriculum. The question is how to keep the children sitting still long enough to learn something. Many of them have lost parents, siblings, homes. Many of them have witnessed violence that no curriculum was designed to address. The teachers who endure are those who learned, often without formal training, the basics of trauma-informed teaching. They give children paper and crayons. They let them draw whatever they want. They look at the drawings without commenting. Then they slowly introduce numbers, letters, songs. The progress is measured not in test scores, but in the number of children who, 3 months later, can sit through a full hour of class without standing up and walking out. There is a generation of Syrian children, now between 5 and 15, who have known nothing but war. There is another generation, now between 15 and 25, who lost what should have been the most formative decade of their lives. There is a third generation, now between 25 and 40, who built careers, families, and ambitions in the years before 2011 and watched all three be either destroyed, suspended, or radically redefined. Each of these generations has a different relationship with the future. The youngest are oddly hopeful because they have nothing to compare the present to. The middle one is the most fragile. The third has the deepest sense of loss, but also the most concrete tools to try to rebuild. And then there is the question of who exactly is now in charge. The political transition that followed the fall of the previous regime in late 2024 is itself unfinished. A coalition of armed groups, civilian figures, and former opposition leaders has been negotiating since early 2025 what the next institutional architecture of the country will look like. The negotiations have included questions of constitutional reform, of the future of minority communities, of the integration of armed factions into a single national force, of the status of the autonomous administration in the northeast, of relations with neighboring countries, and of the role of foreign powers that for years maintained military presence on Syrian soil. The negotiations are difficult. They have moments of progress and moments of dangerous regression. Anyone who tells you they know how this will end in the spring of 2026 is either lying or guessing. What is undeniable is that the daily life of most Syrians no longer depends, as it did for years, on which armed group controls the next checkpoint. The number of active military fronts has dropped sharply. The bread, when it is available, can be bought without the buyer having to declare loyalty to any faction. The schools, when they are open to everyone. The hospitals, when they have medicine, treat everyone. These small normalities, which in any other country would be invisible because they are baseline, are in Syria the most concrete proof that something fundamental has shifted. But shifts are not guarantees. And this is what every conversation with a Syrian eventually arrives at. The fear that after so many false dawns, this one too could close. The fear that the international attention, which never lasted long, will move definitively elsewhere, leaving the country to manage the rebuilding alone. The fear that the divisions among the new political actors will harden into a new conflict. The fear of a regional war involving Israel, Iran, Lebanon, and Turkey that could spill back across borders that have never been entirely sealed. For someone like Abu Yusuf, the barber in Aleppo, those fears are not abstractions. He has lived through 3 of them already. He says that what keeps him from leaving again is not optimism, but a simpler calculation. He is 47. He has a trade. His sons need to learn the trade. The trade requires a chair, a mirror, and a city with hair to cut. The city, despite everything, still has hair to cut. So he stays. The official version says that Syria is at the beginning of a long process of normalization. The reality on the ground says that normalization is one possible path among several, and that the path being walked at any given moment depends on factors that no single Syrian controls. The exchange rate today is set by a handful of older men in a cafe in central Damascus, and by decisions made in Washington, in Brussels, in Ankara, in Tehran, in Riyadh, in Moscow. The price of cooking gas tomorrow depends on a pipeline in Iraq, on a tanker in the eastern Mediterranean, on the security of a road through the northwestern hills. The chance that a returnee from Germany will stay or leave depends on whether the electricity in his new neighborhood comes on for 3 hours a day or for none. And yet, in the basements of the old city of Damascus, in workshops that have been there for more than 4 centuries, men and women still produce the inlaid wooden boxes that were once exported across the Mediterranean. In the spice markets, traders still sell mixtures whose recipes have been passed down for more than 200 years. In the courtyards of family houses, women still gather in late afternoon to fold vine leaves around rice and lamb, in a gesture that has not changed since their great-grandmothers performed it before any of the current borders existed. In churches in Malula, prayers are still chanted in Aramaic, the only place in the world where a living dialect of the language Jesus spoke is still in daily use. In Sufi lodges around the country, weekly gatherings of dhikr still bring together men in white robes who sway and recite in slow concentric circles around a candle. In bookshops in Latakia, copies of Adonis, Nizar Kabani, Gharda al-Saman, and Mahmoud Darwish remain on the shelves. And the booksellers still know which poems each customer prefers. These are the layers of life that no headline captures and no satellite registers. They are also the layers that explain why, after everything that has happened, the country continues to exist. Syria should not exist as a country today, not with more than 600,000 of its people dead in a single conflict, not with more than half of its population uprooted, not with an economy that has lost 9/10 of its scale, not with infrastructure so devastated that the cost of rebuilding it equals more than a decade of the entire national budget. Not after 5 decades of authoritarian rule that hollowed out institutions, censored writers, jailed activists, and turned distrust into a default emotion. Not after 14 years of war that drew in at least 5 foreign militaries on its soil. Not after sanctions that froze the formal banking sector, not after the collapse of the currency, not after the loss of an entire generation of professionals to migration, not after the disappearance of more than 100,000 of its citizens into a prison system whose archives are still being read. And yet Syria exists. It exists in the line at the bakery in Medan at 6 in the morning. It exists in the smell of the soap workshop in the alley of Hamidiyya. It exists in the lamp of the chemistry student who studies until midnight by the light of a single bulb powered by a rooftop battery. It exists in the prayer of the grandmother in Malula who still speaks Aramaic. It exists in the calloused hands of the engineer in Homs who evaluates one damaged building after another without billing for half the visits. It exists in the patience of the guard at St. Simeon, who sweeps the stones every morning even when no one is coming to see them. It exists. It exists because the people who refused to leave learned, generation after generation, to be patient with time on a scale longer than any regime, longer than any war, longer than any sanction. The land was here before the borders. The bread was here before the headlines. The Aramaic prayer was here before the maps, and the families who stayed know, even when they cannot say it out loud, that what is being rebuilt is not exactly a country in the modern sense. It is a continuity, the continuity of a place that has been continuously inhabited for longer than almost any other on the planet, and that has, in every century, found a way to keep one foot in front of the other. This story is not only about Syria, it is about every place in the world that the news cycle declares finished. Every population the official maps describe as broken. Every territory the international community quietly moves past on its way to the next crisis. As the rest of the planet enters a period of cascading conflicts, climate displacement, and economic shocks of a scale not seen in generations, places like Syria stop being exceptions to a stable order and start to look like rehearsals for what may come. The pattern of half-functional infrastructure, of split families across continents, of currencies that lose their value in a single year, of governments that change overnight while daily life goes on more or less unchanged, of returns that are partial and tentative and never quite complete. This pattern is not Syrian. It is increasingly the texture of the world. Those who have walked the alleys of Damascus at dawn, who have shared a cup of tea with a barber in Aleppo, who have listened to a teacher in Idlib explain how she calmed a classroom of children after a bad night, who have watched a guard at an ancient ruin sweep the same stones for the 32nd year, know something that does not fit in any policy document. They know that the question is never whether life continues. Life always continues. The question is what kind of life, on whose terms, at what cost, and with what memory. Syria today is a country that does not yet know what it will be. It is also a country that knows, more clearly than most, what it has been and what it can no longer afford to be. Between those two knowledges, 15 million people wake up every morning, fill containers of water, count cars in the street, light a kerosene burner and decide, one more time, to stay. The world that scrolled past their war for 14 years has already moved on to other headlines. They have not. They cannot. They are the place. And the place, despite everything, is still here. Those who lived it up close already know. Those who only read the headlines do not.